with our frailty as human beings. And in the face of that, we have seen the world over how people have utilized this time to draw nearer to God, but not in the way that we are traditionally used to. Because we were all on lockdown, many were isolated, and the only form of communication we had to commune with our family, our friends, and our church community was via technology, either using our phones, the internet, apps, websites, etc. And we saw that parents and even grandparents who may have long ago had technological phobias begin embracing and incorporating its use as part of their daily lives. We've even seen pastors and other religious leaders who in years gone by would have made bold statements like, Facebook is the devil. Get on that same Facebook and start having prayer sessions and Bible sessions and church services. And through all of this, we have finally come to the realization that technology, much like a hammer or a pen, is merely a tool that can be used to build up or to destroy, all depending on the user. Now, as Methodists, we believe in the 4 alls, and that is, all need to be saved, all may be saved, all may know themselves saved, and all may be saved to the uttermost. Now, we see these tenets reflected in the Great Commission in Matthew 28, verse 19, when Jesus admonishes his disciples to go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations. Now, what other or better way is there in the 21st century to reach the nations than through the use of technology? Now, the gospel, it is called the good news, but how good and effective can the news really be if people don't know about it? Now, we often hear the complaint that people aren't coming to church anymore, congregations are dwindling, and this is not just a Methodist problem, this is a church universal issue. Yet, there are still some churches that have been able to thrive and continue to grow, even while others struggle, and this is in part because of the fact that they've been early adapters to the changes in time and technology, and through their technological advancements, they have been able to get into homes that are outside of their community and outside of their general reach. And their virtual presence has been able to create enough care and interest to cause those people to want to go and seek them out. It's the Apostle Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 22 and 23 that said, I have become all things to all people, that I might by all means save some. I do it for the sake of the gospel, so that I may share in its blessings. Paul reminds us that we now ought to be all things to all people when sharing the gospels. And to do that effectively, we must first go where the people are. And in our current age, and I am confident in the future ages to come, the people are here. They are online, they are on social media, Facebook, WhatsApp, Snapchat, TikTok, Clubhouse, Discord, and the list goes on. So what that means for us going forward is that our methods and techniques that we use for mission and outreach as a church will have to be transformed. The content, of course, will forever remain the same, but it is our mindset on what missions and outreach looks like. It is our mindset on what missions and outreach looks like, and how we choose to engage with that is what needs to be transformed. It may mean that now having an active social media an internet presence is no longer a nice to have for churches, but is now a requirement. This also means realizing that the role of a social media manager is a real job now to consider in the life of the church. We must realize that having an online presence is just as critical as having an in-person presence. And in some cases, it might actually be more so, because as the time changes, the validity of something is often verified by whether or not you can find details about it on the web. Now, we all in here, at some point, has used Google or social media to verify whether or not something is true. We also use the internet for how-to guides. For example, during the pandemic, people were on YouTube searching how to make bread. We as a church, when someone Googles how to pray, is God real? We as a church must be present and active in providing answers to these questions in the virtual space, where they have the ability to impact more persons than, quite frankly, the entire population of our combined Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis. So let's talk a little bit about technology and our vibrant history of Methodism within the St. Kitts Circuit and the Caribbean. Now, as Methodists, we have helped to shape and transform the fabric of our respective countries. We have and we continue to raise up leaders in areas of society and can proudly say that many of the changes and transformation in our country were because of Methodists, whether it is education or in politics. What better example of this than our very own, the late Sir Probyn Inniss, who was a teacher, a lawyer, a governor, and also a historian, and thankfully was able to capture the history of our church in his book titled Methodism in St. Kitts, 1787 to 2006. Now in Exodus chapter 12, God instituted the festival of the Passover for the Israelites. And he did that so that for generations to come, they could remember their struggle of slavery and remember their God that brought them into freedom and the promised land. God at the very beginning realized that over time, people forget. They lose their history and they lose the sense of who they are. I dare to say that not much has changed since then. And I've heard Methodists time and time again share the same concerns about our own church. Unfortunately though, many times these concerns can be misdirected when it comes to technology because people see it as a hindrance to the resurrection of our past glory rather than an avenue that can help bring our history from the past into the present, which it can be. Instead of worrying that we are losing our history, technology and media can help us to memorialize that history. Is it not time that we as Methodists tell our own stories instead of waiting for others to do it for ourselves? So Probyn Inniss did that by writing books. Well, with the aid of media and technology, we can do so by making and distributing films. We can create documentaries on Methodism in the Caribbean and the Americas. We can show our rich history and the massive impact that we have had throughout our region, and by doing so, reinstill the sense of pride and remembrance in our people and the world over. And much like the Passover festival, this too can be shared for generations to come. So when someone asks what Methodists have done for them or their communities or their country, now we are in a space where we don't have to talk to respond to them. We simply need to pull up the video and show them. Now I want to talk a little bit about technology and age and to address some falsehoods surrounding that. And this is because I am sure you, as well as I, have heard many people say this when it comes to technology of any sort. Oh, I leave that for the young people them. Me too old for that. My brain's too rusty. I would like to say, for everyone who has that particular mindset, that it is a lie that you are telling yourself. This is how I know it's a lie. Our God is an omniscient God. That means that he is an all-knowing God, and he is also a God of wisdom. And in James chapter 1, verse 5, he says, if any of you is lacking in wisdom, ask God, who gives to all generously, ungrudgingly, and it will be given to you. And in Genesis chapter 1 and verse 27, verse 26 and 27, we are told that God created humankind in his image and also in his very likeness. What this tells me is that it is not a matter of cognitive ability when it comes to learning new technology, but rather it's an issue of our mindset. We need Methodists of all ages to be full participants in this new era of the technological church, because there are others just like you that are in the virtual space that need to be reached. And as we know, like matters attract. There are also younger persons like myself who can greatly benefit from your wisdom and also from your experience. So whether you are 25 or you are 75, there is a place for you. You just need to be open to it. There was a famous quote from Henry Ford that said, whether you think you can or you think you can't, you're right. So I would like to delve now into an area that we don't often get into as Methodists, and that is dealing with technology in reference to finances and investments. One of the pillar goals for the MCCA is to become a self-sufficient church. Now, on January 23rd, 2020, the government of St. Kitts and Nevis passed the Virtual Assets Bill. Now, this was a bill to legalize Bitcoin and virtual currencies, with the goal of helping to facilitate the ease of doing business towards a cashless society. Then, on March 21st, 2021, the Eastern Caribbean Central Bank launched DCash, the digital version of the Eastern Caribbean dollar. At this very moment, the Jamaica Central Bank is in the process of rolling out the digital version of the Jamaican dollar called Jamdex. I attended a Sedema Disaster Management Conference in December 2019, and the presenters from the British Virgin Islands indicated that they too were reviewing the possibility of having a digital currency, because after the damaging effects of Hurricane Irma in 2017, with all the banks closed due to damages that they sustained island-wide, their purchasing power was greatly diminished. And having a digital currency will allow them to be able to maintain their purchasing power in the event of another natural disaster, which really is when it's needed the most. Now, what all this really means is that money is now moving from here to here. And we as a church have to be prepared for these changes, because they are coming. The way we tithe, the way we make payments, the way we accept funds, the way we invest, we all have to change and prepare for that now and put ourselves in a position to thrive and not be struggling and trying to catch up when these changes eventually take full effect. The transformation of a financial system from a physical to a digital one is major, and it has far-reaching implications. Therefore, we as a church have to be able to adapt, and quickly. We often see technology in the church in the context of live streaming, monitor, cameras, mics, etc. But if we are to become that self-sufficient church, then we really need to start reorienting our thinking where that is concerned. And the time to do that is now. Now, in sharing all of these wonderful benefits that we can derive from technological advancement, benefits to enrich and expand our outreach capabilities, to revive our history, and to manage our finances, I would be remiss if I did not take a moment to highlight that there is a cost attached for this technological progress. It is not cheap, and it will take a sizable sum of initial capital investment. But the end result, once stewarded well, can bring about great positive transformation in ourselves, our communities, and serve as a beacon of light in this dark world, bringing honor and glory to our God. Now, in the St. Kitts Circuit, we have started on the path of technological development with the establishment of the Methodist media team, of which I am a member. But that is only the very beginning. And as you've heard, the path is wide and is vast, but it is not insurmountable, especially for people of God. So now that we know what's needed, and we know that not some, but all of us have the capacity to learn and play a vital role in the way forward, what are we going to do? What are we as Methodists going to do to ensure that in years to come, Methodism and the gospel is alive, it remains relevant, and continues to contribute to shaping our lives, our communities, and the world over? I will close by reminding us of this truth, that no matter the tool we choose to use in sharing the gospel, the best thing we as people called Methodists can do to bring the gospel to the masses is to live a life that is a true reflection of it, to abide by our principles as citizens of the kingdom of the Most High God, and to live in accordance with His will. That is and always will be our greatest form of witness in this ever-changing world. The means we use to share the gospel, it is going to change. And we have to come to that realization and accept that. But our God, He forever remains the same. Thank you.
Ms. Liburd, it's a good thing that you testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Good? Oh, technology. It has its ups, it has its downs. But we're thankful for it. Ms. Liburd, we want to thank you very much for the lecture, for bringing to the fore some pertinent issues when it comes to technology, Methodism, and the gospel. And so we will now open the floor to any questions or comments that persons may have. We'll make the mic available so that you can make your way to that mic, which will be placed in the center there, in the aisle. And so you make your way there, you feel the question, ask the question. We'll take 2 or 3 at a time, perhaps, and then allow Ms. Liburd to respond. So the floor is now open for questions or comments. As you ask your question or make a comment, we'll ask you to just state your name, so a person's name. Thank
Good afternoon, all. Probyn Chatterton is the name, and I want to thank Ms. Liburd for her presentation. I think it's timely, and it's no accident that we are celebrating that MRN got off the ground today. I am pleased that you have said that all can take part. And my question to you is, how do you plan, as part of the media team, to ensure that the older persons are involved in using the technology? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So the Methodist media team will be hosting training sessions. We are currently working on putting together a schedule for that. Now, generally, whenever we put out a notice saying that we're going to have a training, people automatically assume that is just for the youth of the church. And that's not necessarily the case. It's open to the church. But we do realize that the hesitation for our older members is warranted because technology is not something that was a part of their daily lives growing up. And so one of the things that we're considering is the possibility of having training sessions specifically for the older members of our congregations, and possibly looking from a youth and young adult standpoint of creating an outreach mechanism specifically for our older adults so that we can start teaching them basic things like properly utilizing your cell phones. You know, there are many people, even at my age, that have cell phones and don't know how to use half their features, right? So we think as youth and young adults, that should be, going forward, that's one of the missions that we're going to be looking at. We think it's also a good idea because it helps us to sort of create a space where we can sort of bridge that generational divide as well. So those are two of the things that we're looking forward to ensuring that whenever we have those training sessions for persons to come and join the Methodist media team, that people realize that they're open to everyone, and then to also start with having those training sessions for the youth and young adults, specifically for elderly persons, to start learning how to use different forms of technology, starting with cell phones.
Good evening, Simon, everyone. Dr. Chatterton steal my question. But I'm happy that she started out because your presentation this evening is wonderful. And in just a short moment, I have learned a lot. And so I look forward that when the media team ready to have a seminar so we can learn, because there's a lot of things there to be learned. I sometimes have struggled to deal with my Facebook, but thank you very much, and keep it up, and may God blessing be always with you.
Christopher McMahon, I beg to give a little latitude so that I could put my question into context. You mentioned something in your presentation about, I think you said a social media manager. That's novel, because as I follow the evolution of technology, I read a most interesting article a few weeks ago by that guy who presents, well, he highlighted it, but he didn't write the article. The Global Public Square, I'm sure you're familiar with him on CNN, Zarid Zakari, I think is the name. A very long article about how this change in technology is so different from all the others. For example, we have always responded to change. I mean, if I ask, or if we ask as a church, Reverend Stasia, to take a horse, to ride a horse to preach in Gateway, we say, "You're like criminals, you're crazy." But that was the only way we got around in those days. by us, right? So we have always responded to change, but this one is significantly different. His contention is, or well, still is, that this technology is so invasive, it is so all-encompassing, it has this subtlety, which none of us know about. You heard him speaking about that thing that programs,
Software.
not the software, is
Coding.
what's that?
Code.
The code. What code? Is a special name for it?
Software engineering.
Can't remember. Okay, the point is that it is programming you, and you don't even know. And he was making the point of how the American society is being torn apart by another superpower because they are subtly getting to the public in ways the public don't even understand. You understand? So I've said all of that to ask a simple question, you know? If he's speaking on the global scale, and he's speaking about superpower societies being ripped apart, because that's what's happening here. Pay attention, that's exactly what is happening, being ripped apart from within. Well, how do we propose to manage this, Tiffany, as a church? This thing is huge.
Thank you for that question, Brother McMahon. And I think that's a very apt question at this time as well. So what I would say, that is the reason why I stated in my speech that we cannot wait anymore. Now is the time. Because we may not feel it here and think it's the news, right? But technology is moving at a rapid rate. Currently, what we all use is called Web 2. We're entering into an era of Web 3, right? Web 3 deals with a lot more ownership of material. Right? We're entering into a virtual reality era. We saw that Facebook changed their name from Facebook to Meta, and so now you're hearing about the metaverse, right? And people are buying land in the metaverse. And so as a church, we now have to be like, well, if people are going to be in the metaverse and they have land in the metaverse, do we as a church now need to own digital land so that we can serve people, because that's where all the people are going now, right? And honestly, the answer to all of that is that we have to start equipping our people with the technology and the know-how. We realize that this is coming. We realize that this is a thing. For me personally, I have started to learn how to code. I'm currently taking a class learning how to code because I recognize that the change is coming, and it's coming fast. And as a Methodist, I really want us to be able to own our own presence on the web, because that's what it's going to come down to, is that if you don't own your presence, then you either don't have one or somebody might steal it. So my answer to you is that we, recognizing that the change is happening, is coming, we now have to start training our people from the ground up.
But not really follow up. The word I was trying to get is the algorithm.
Oh, okay.
Algorithms, yeah.
All right. Yes, yes.
Okay. Corinne Small. I too join in this appreciation of what you have shared with us this evening. On the downside of this, a bright picture has been painted. We are persons who don't generally like change. And so in changing, we look at all of the positives, but persons who still prefer the face-to-face rather than the distance that we are talking about. How prepared are we in terms of how will it affect us in terms of who we are as
Methodist.
as a people? Because it has downsides to it, because we have to be aware of the space that we are dealing with and how the knowledge or what we have will enable us to deal with the situation before us. We understand they said that we soon going to have a chip When you hear all of those comments, how do you, you're able to cope with that, to come to the reality of that, whether it is true, yes or not, but we sure moving to that kind of atmosphere. And I know a lot of us are not willing to go in that direction.
Thanks for that. So what I would say, having an online presence and a vibrant one as a church does not negate our responsibility for in-person interactions. So this is in conjunction with our in-person praise, worshiping, outreach. But now we have to realize that the in-person work that we do is no longer sufficient. We have to do in-person and online. Our online presence has to be just as strong as our in-person presence. Because in years to come, if you're not online, you do not exist. And it's sad to say, but that's going to be the reality of it. Right? So for the things that we do, if we're having prayer sessions and things like that for people here, then we need to ensure that our people online are also experiencing those same things. Now, we have a media team where now we're in a space where we're able to stream those things, but then we also need to look at programming specifically built out for online, because the format in which we worship in person does not always translate well to an online audience. As Mr. McMahon would have mentioned, there's an algorithm. You know, there's a way that works online that doesn't necessarily work that wouldn't work in person, and vice versa. Online people have shorter attention spans. So whereas we can have a 2-hour service, online people might want a half-an-hour service, hour tops, or else they lose interest. So these are things that we have to look at over time, that yes, we are going to run them alongside each other, but we can't run them the same. And we have to keep those things in mind. In reference to people being concerned about what is to come, that's the reason why we're having conversations like these now, right? And that's the reason why we're gonna have to start training now, and that's the reason why we need the older persons in our congregations to be active participants now. Because you're going to be here when some of these things start happening. All of you are not gonna be gone. You're gonna be here still, you know? And you need to understand it for yourself, because if National Bank comes and decides today, we're no longer using cash, you know, you're either gonna have to use your card or you're gonna have to use Dcash on the blockchain. What are you gonna do? Right? You're gonna say, I'm gonna switch banks and go to a next bank. Right? I'll take off all your money. Right? And realistically, once one bank starts, it's going to be a trickle-down effect. They're all going to do it. Right? So instead of allowing ourselves to get frustrated about the whole thing, we are saying that as a church, let's just start learning about it now and start growing with it now, so that when it hits, we're not caught off guard. And we're not struggling and be like, Lord, I don't know what I can do. They're accustomed to get my money and thing. Well, you know, the National Bank says no more bank lines, no more tellers. You know, you have to now go online for your account. What are you going to do? It's going to happen. It is going to happen. Finance is going to become digital over time. Because the thing is, it costs money to make physical money. But once you have an online technological system in place, it's in place. It's more cost effective. And financial people like things that are cost effective, speaking from a finance major. So it's going to happen. And so we just have to be prepared for it. We don't need to be afraid of it. Our God tells us that we ought not to be anxious for anything. And I am a firm believer in that. But we do have to prepare. And so I'm asking that we start that process now.
Tyrone Hunkins. Sister Tiffany, I rise to really congratulate you for a very wonderful, concise, and yet very informative and provocative presentation. You have really done a wonderful job. I commend you. And I am also touched by your response. I didn't realize that you were so deep in the technology. I always see you behind a camera or something. I didn't realize that you were so deep. But I really want to thank you for that. Like Brother Meldine, I can say that Dr. Chatterton stole my question, because that was my first question I wanted to ask. And imagine I'm sitting right here by the mic and I allow her to come from all the way down there and ask my question. Nevertheless, I just want to ask you this question. Having been involved in the media and being a part of the move from the in-person to the technology, and I rather like the way you brought together the relationship between the need of the older people for the younger people and the younger people for the wisdom of the older people. I rather like that very much, and we should think more about that. My question then is, having been this involved and being among the youths and I believe the elderly, so far as we have come now in terms of our progress from where we were before the COVID-19 pandemic struck, until now, do you have you any feedback that you can share with us from maybe older people who would have said to you, or you have heard their testimony through others, as to how they have benefited so far from the technology, especially somebody who might have said, me too old for this. Do you have any testimony that you can share with us?
So I would say this, the beautiful thing about our church is that when our media team came together and we presented a proposal asking for equipment that we think would benefit our circuit, you know, the church came together and they approved it. And when they did that, we were able to begin, we started streaming before that, but it was a lot of makeshift equipment that we had to sort of put together to make it work. You know, and the church had a need, and you responded to the need, and you provided us with the equipment that we wanted. And now we're able to have these regular streams, right? I would say more than anything, people, and I could speak in particular for my grandmother. Ma has been, since I think January 2020, she's been a shut-in. And we would have streaming, and I would, after church on Sundays, I would usually go and visit her, and I would show her the service. She usually wants to know like who it is that's preaching that Sunday. If we have something that stream, if there's a circuit event, I would show her, and she would, surprisingly, she would sit down, take my phone, and watch the entire service. And I was shocked. I was seriously shocked, because Ma died at age 96. So when she was doing this, she was 95, going on 96. And even during the times when she was hospitalized, you know, and we go and visit, and we're like, well, oh, this person preached today, we have it online, you know. She grabbed my phone and she would just sit in that hospital and watch the entire service, right? Because she's a staunch Methodist. She grew up in the time where Methodism was everything to them. From the moment they woke up to the moment they went to bed, you know, they were down by the chapel, because that's what they used to call the church in Tabernacle, chapel. You know, they were down by chapel, it was them, it was their parents, you know, and their children after that. And so I could say personally, just from within my own family, it has made a huge impact. You know, I remember when we had the first virtual Alders Gate, and Ma's been a member of the Tabernacle Methodist Choir since she was 13 years old. And the Tabernacle Choir had an item to do for Alders Gate, that first virtual Alders Gate. And you know, I think a few of them are here, Miss Springer, Tyrone, Alice. And I recorded their song for Alders Gate. And when I was done, I went home, I was like, Ma, look, see the choir was singing. And I mean, she was so glued to it. She was smiling. She was saying, Ma, Miss Springer always singing the harmony, you know? You know, she was
she was so engaged in the whole thing, just to be able, even though she couldn't be a part of it anymore, just to be able to see it and experience it. Like you could see that it literally brought joy to her, you know? And so I think we often think that, okay, our elderly persons, they might not be able to do the work when it comes to media, but they definitely are beneficiaries of it, because it comes a time when they too can no longer come to church. And so we think that when we're streaming, it's for young persons, but no, it's for them as well. So when they get to the point when they can't attend, then their church is still there for them, just in a virtual form. So that has been my experience with that. Yeah.
Stacy Williams Christmas. Let me just commend you, Sister Tiffany, for that presentation. Just to add, as you highlighted in your presentation about the MCC strategic plan, one of the things that the MCC has started is that when it comes to technology, the MCC has literally released the work of technology on the youth and young adults, in the sense that the youth and young adults lead the way in the development of the technology generally on the MCC scale. In the Leeward Islands, there has not been, we have been moving forward with that, but I can say for South Caribbean itself, in their conference 2021, our council, they set a theme, and their theme is focused on pushing young people into leading the technological age. And for the past year and a half, if many of us, we realize that Reverend Mac tend to send things as well, you know, on the media and everything. And there are young people who are really at the backbone of all of that we see from South Caribbean. And for us now in the Leeward Island District, we have embraced that as well from 2020, 2021, in the sense of having our young people and encouraging our young people to really help to move the technology forward. And I'm looking around here, and we have more, you know, older persons than the young people themselves. And so I'm really hoping that they are listening online, because it was circulated. So I'm hoping that they're listening online, where in order for us to meet the changes of technology, whether the finance field or social field or educational field, we will need the young people and the hands on deck in getting it done, as well as the older persons who have this zeal and that interest and the curiosity of what technology has to present to us in this age. So I just encourage us to remain open for what is to come.
I crave your indulgence, and I promise I wouldn't ask any more questions after this. You know, when I look at the trends, other days are early still, in fact, we're still in COVID, just that it's in a better situation. But as we look at the early trends, right? For example, those persons who manage those expensive office suites, especially in New York, the financial capitals of the world, they notice that there is a decline in the taking of office space, and the experts are convinced that it's not going to return, because the office space now is reconfigured. Many persons are working from home. The central bank in St. Kitts was working from home for nearly 2 years without any hitch. Well, I've said that to ask you this. Don't you think it is a real possibility that the digital church can replace the physical church?
No, Mr. Mahmoud. trying not to scare the people. But yes, that is something that has crossed my mind quite a bit. And yes, that is a very, very real possibility. That's actually what the world is shifting towards, to be honest. But I would say this, that there is still a need for human physical interaction. I think we're always going to need that. You know, it's one thing to pray for somebody virtually, but at some point they're going to need a touch. And so because of that, I don't think that part is ever going to go away. Perhaps worshiping every Sunday in a structure as this will no longer be the norm, but there will still have to be some form of coming together as a people. It just might not be in this context. Yeah, so I would say that. So that's something that we too have to start looking at as we move forward. So I don't think it's necessary anymore for physical structures that are churches. And as a Methodist church, we have quite a bit already, so I think you're fine on that front. But I think even as we look at building out spaces in the future, it might be more in the realm of recreational spaces for more mass type events and mass gatherings as opposed to every Sunday type church event. And just to say, I think I would have mentioned the metaverse. The meta church is going to become a real thing. And so we, at some point, are going to have a Methodist church on a corner somewhere in the virtual world, that when people have their headpieces on and they're enjoying their virtual escape, they can escape to a Methodist church somewhere in there as well. So that's something for us to think about as the future advances.
All right, there's one question coming from Jan.
Good afternoon, evening. To Tiffany, you said that we are going to a technical world, right? And we're going to learn certain things in social media. We know technology is good, but do you have any information that how much persons on island has access to technology? We can't go online unless our members has certain devices to cooperate these kind of island platforms. So I'm asking you, what is the plan to know whether or not certain elders has the accessibility to internet or even for cell phone devices?
So I would say this, on average, whenever we stream an event for our circuit, usually our online presence can range between 2,000 to 3,000 persons. Right, so what that tells us is that it's not just our Syncits persons who are logging on to our streams, it's also our members who are in the diaspora, who are being reached and who are interested. Now, with reference to having numbers in terms of persons who have access to devices, I think that's a very real question that we have to face. That is not something I know at this point in time, but our churches are such whereby it's easy for us to correspond with our circuits, with our congregational stewards, and just do a quick touch base and see where we are in our congregation. So I actually like that idea. So thank you for bringing that up. And I'm sure as a future outreach, I think in my presentation, we talked about missions and outreach is going to look differently. And so these are the type of things that we have to start thinking about. In the past, when we think of missions, we might not have thought of buying cell phones to give to our members as a missionary outreach. But now we're realizing that that is real. So I thank you for that, because these are the real things that we know as a church have to start thinking about. So thanks for that.
Tiff, in light of the present situation in terms of we have fall off in attendance at church, especially with our youths, and how do you think presently they are accessing the services or online? How do you see that happening, their presence as young people in terms of the gospel online? Because I know definitely they're not coming to church, and I want to know if just because it's technology and it's something that young people really like, how are they? Do you think they're really online when we have worship and that kind of thing? Okay.
So what I would say to that is that our young people have short attention spans.
And that's just the era that we're in right now. So when we have a live stream Sunday service, your population demographic is not going to be a lot of young people per se. But where you find your young people are on platforms like TikTok, right? On Discord, on Instagram. And so these are the places that the church is going to have to go to and have a presence on and create 30-second videos that's explaining the gospel. Because this is where you're going to reach them. We now have to go where they are. In the past, we had the privilege of having parents who were very Christ-centered. And so, not just parents, but entire communities that were very Christ-centered, right? And so we didn't have to worry about having the presence of our young people, because their parents were going to ensure that they were present, regardless. But now we're now in a space where we have to treat the outreach of young people the same we treat outreach of adults, and we have to go and find a reason for them to come in, which means first we have to go where they are. And where they are is not tuning into our service on a Sunday, but where they are is on social media, just browsing. And so when they're browsing and flipping through their pages, we need to come up in their feeds. We need to be an option for them to browse through as well. Yes.
Any other questions? Comments? Of course, it's the start of the conversation. Not that the conversation ends here. I want to piggyback on some things that were raised by Sister Tiffany and some questions there. The involvement of the older persons. We made mention of the phobia where the use of technology is concerned. But there's also room for content, because we have a website. You need content on the website. And so the older persons can provide the content in doing research in certain things and providing those things to be uploaded onto the website. So that is not just your use of it, but also providing for it as well. So we don't feel as though we don't use it, so we don't need to be involved in it. Not only providing the content, but such things also need to be vetted, right? Before they're uploaded. And so that is where the older persons can come in as well, I would want to believe. So that all persons have some vested interest in the technology that the church is seeking to adopt. I could ask the question, how many of us have ever gone on the website? But keep your hands down. But you need to go on the website. There is that which persons are clamoring for, things like the hymnal to be digital, for the prayer book to be digital, so that we don't have, I mean, with monitors, people stop walking with those things. They're now depending upon the monitors to come on so they could sing. When we do have hymn books, but that's part of the technology wave that's happening. All right? So the bags are not as big when we're coming to church. I noted too that before there were live streaming like that, because it's only kind of speeded up during COVID. But before, you had events that would happen, and persons would gather at the church to view those events. Remember those times? Yes. So there's an ordination or the welcome service at conference or whatever. People gathered at churches to view those events. But now everybody has a phone for themselves, and so persons have gotten individualistic. And so they want to sit in their own corner and view those events. The fellowship then goes to the door. I know in some countries, when it comes to sports, people gather at one place because the camaraderie of being in one place and cheering for your team means far more than sitting down home by yourself. So those are things that we perhaps need to look at as we go forward. Thank you very much, Sister Tiffany, for the presentation. As I say, it's the beginning of the conversation, and we trust that it will take us somewhere, not just talk, but action. I now invite, Reverend, if there are no other questions or comments.
Reverend.
Yes, sorry, Reverend Blake.
Tiffany, I want to say thank you for that presentation. But I am one of them old people, one of the very old ones. And I am finding now, when I came here 11 years ago, people didn't take me on too much because I was almost considered a foreigner in St. Kitts. But suddenly, they're realizing that I have certain knowledge. And I'm finding myself at this stage of my life being called upon to do certain things that I physically sometimes is difficult, which I would have been able to do 11 years ago with no thought about it. But I'm saying that to say that as I'm asked to do things, and I'm willing to do it, and I have certain knowledge and so on, but to put it, ask me, no. I used to touch type at one time, but now at this time, my fingers go all over the place. And when I read back what I think I wrote, it's something else. So there is frustration. I'm saying that there are a number of us, older ones, who have many things that can be helpful to the congregations and to the younger people. And some, the old days when I was growing up, when you used moonlight night, we used to gather outside and tell stories about this, that, and the other. That they can learn from. But we need now, we are ready to help and to do things, but we're not physically able, not technically able to get them going. Just yesterday, just to put you, I've been asked to assist with choosing hymns for the Sunday school curriculum. That's not a problem, but I'm to get the background. And I'm getting the background slowly but surely. But here was I had got the whole thing set up on the background on this hymn. And to put it now with the other 4 that I had, I don't know where it went. So I've lost all the work I did there. Plus, it ain't gone on to the other one that was there. The point I'm trying to make, we need help in how to do certain things. That's it. And don't try to put us with the younger ones, because the younger ones don't have patience with us. I told you that already. I have to tell you again? But just do that now. So that we who can help still and do things need to be assisted. Another thing is that we need to have people in the church who are willing to come and sit down and listen to you and talk with you, to find out things you're saying. Tape it. You'll get a lot of information that you can go and use otherwise. Persons who are willing to go around to different ones of us and talk with us and find out certain things. That is a necessary thing so that we don't lose a lot of the history and the background that is there, that sometimes we lose it because it's not kept on a record somewhere. I'm just talking as an old person, okay?
Reverend Lake, I'm so happy that you mentioned tape it, because that's why one of the things I mentioned, that it's time for us to tell our own stories. And I talked about us now having the ability to create documentaries on Methodism. And so persons like you are the type of people that we would want to interview for those type of things, so that we can start creating those stories and start telling them to our people and hopefully our community at large, because like I've said before, the work of our Methodists have not just impacted Methodists alone. It's been impactful for our entire society. And so I'm happy that you said that, because that is definitely something that we're hoping to do. We of course are going to need the support. So we look forward to getting that from you, but yes, that is where we are looking towards as well. I like your suggestion, and that's something that we're going to keep in mind when looking at creating sessions for older persons, to ensure that the instructors are people who can have the necessary patience to take their time and sort of, be kind with you and show you the processes, understanding that, you might not catch on as quickly, but you will catch on. In reference to using your software, there is a software now where you can just talk and you can dictate and it will type out the words for you on your computer. I can look into that for you so we can see if we can get you using that instead. That might make things a little bit easier for you going forward. But I must say thank you for those recommendations. Those are things that we have considered as well, and this is why we need the input of our older persons, because as young people, our mindset is sort of straight ahead, because that's what we expect for us. So we really do need that pull-up from time to time for you guys to go, hey, remember this, remember you have these people, you need to take these other things into consideration. We really do need your wisdom and your guidance.
Embracing the technology, because at Ebenezer we have been doing it. Our elders, those who are shut in, we have from time to time have them tape and record, especially for Youth Sundays. We have an elder who is at home and it's been taped and then played back to the children on our Youth Sundays. So we're getting there. And we have the interaction as well, so that the children, they have questions based on the conversation that the elders would have spoken about. And it is awesome to see that the young people really enjoy it, because that is up their street. And so we find that that is a way of the ministry of those who are shut in to our young people in terms of the history. So the stories that are told, the young people really enjoy them. So that's another thing that we can use technology for, bringing the church, bringing the ministry of those who are shut in, and to those of us who are there, their presence. So.
And like we say, in the era of technology and media, content is king. And so the more content that we're able to have, the better. And the more content that we can have from those of us who have been here long before we have, the greater it is. Because as we are also growing in our spiritual journeys, we need that information to bolster us, to be able to help us to go forward, that we can pass it on to the next generation. So we definitely welcome all of that. And that is why I say we have to start telling our own stories. We have to start creating our own narratives and presenting it to the world, not just to our church, but presenting it to the world. And for the impact that Methodists have had, just in the Federation of St. Kitts and Nevis alone, I know there is a wealth of information, even within this church right now, between Reverend Lake, Mr. McMahon, Teacher Lizzie, and the list goes on. I'm sure there's a wealth of information that can be shared on who we are as Methodists and our church. My sister over here from Deatbe, you know. So we look forward to meeting with, talking to all of you, gaining the information. And again, our hope is that it's a collaborative effort. So going forward, when we mention technology and anything that has to do with it, we want everyone to realize that we are talking about the entire church, not just one sect. Okay? So we need everybody to keep that in mind, that when we say technology, when we say media, we need all hands on deck, because it's going to take a uniform effort to take us into the space where we need to be, so that we can solidify our space in this new future that's coming full speed ahead at us. Thank you.
It's not my task to say thank you, so I will invite Brother Christopher McMahon, Secretary Stewart, to move the vote of thanks. But as he comes, is just to note that we did mention that today marks 9 years since the Methodist Radio Network came into existence on the 1st of May 2013. That was a major leap, and had he been alive today, our late brother Al Elms was very instrumental in getting us on the World Wide Web, because we know that the radio station was internet-based and is internet-based. And so we remember him at this time, even as we celebrate the 9th anniversary of MI. Brother Magnus.
Thank you, Reverend, and of course I just will quickly adopt the protocol that has been established, and quickly to add that yes, one would remember Brother Al, quite a soldier in this field, and a week or two before he passed, I keep telling Reverend Mark this, you know, we had a very long meeting in the vestry at Wesley, and we were going to move with your help. You didn't know that, because we didn't get a chance to come to you. We were going to move the station, we would keep the internet aspect of it, but we were going to make it an FM station. And we had an engineer there with us, and we had hours of discussion. All the notes, only to be presented to the appropriate body. And I suppose it is not dead, but when he died, boy, that really blew everything out of us who was there. So there you have it. Anyhow, my task at this time is to move a vote of thanks. And I want to thank Reverend Mark for so ably leading us as chair this evening. I want to thank on your behalf Sister Tyrona for giving us words of welcome. I also want to thank Reverend Hunkins for leading us so well in prayer. And our media team, of course, ever present, ever so able. We want to thank them as well for bringing this to a much wider audience. And I thank our organist as well this afternoon. I want to, of course, thank very much and to thank them for coming. The late Sir Probyn's two daughters, Sister Marcia and Sister Angela. You know, if I may say so, you being here almost as it were adds a sense of authenticity to what we're doing. We really appreciate it. Thanks very much for coming. And do give our regards to Lady Inniss. Of course, I know she's listening. You know, we'd give her our regards. Now to Sister Tiffany. When she began, she said she was wondering whether she was the right person, whether she could live up to the task. She spoke about public speaking. My goodness. But she arrived at the correct conclusion. She said because of how she's involved in technology, she thinks she would have been more suited. But now we can confirm that, Sister Tiffany. You really were stellar. You were very, very good. Your presentation was well thought out and well presented. And sometimes one of the tests of these things is the question time. You were able to respond most admirably to the questions. So I thought that you did well, and I'm sure all of us here think that way, and I just want to thank you very much for your in-depth, analytical, forward-looking presentation. Thank you ever so much. You are, if you don't think so, you are a wonderful resource lady. Thank you very much. In closing, I want to thank all of you for being here. I think I missed young Sister Francis for introducing you. Sister Francis, young Sister Francis, thank you very much for your introduction of Sister Tiffany. And I want to thank all of you for being here. If we were here and there were nobody here, just benches, even though we have a virtual audience, we would not have felt very well. So I want to thank you for taking the time out and joining us this afternoon. And to all of you on the various media platforms, we recognize as well, thanks for investing your time with us. Thank you very much, and have a good evening.
You can tell from Sister Tiffany when she started, she was actually getting her feet wet, hence the intimidation. But now that she's gotten her feet wet, we'd want to just admonish her when she comes into her kingdom, her queendom, to remember us. Yes. We stand as we sing the hymn, number 12, Praise My Soul, the King of Heaven, and after which we invite the Reverend Stasia Williams-Christmas to pronounce the benediction. Praise my soul, the King of Heaven.
To his in distress. Praise him still the same forever, slow to chide and swift to bless. Praise him, praise him, praise him, praise him, praise him in his faithfulness.
Let us pray. Dear Lord, we thank you for a wonderful day. We thank you for being with us tonight. We thank you for the information that we were able to gain and the knowledge and the zeal now that you have imparted on us to go forth as a church to continue embracing technology to glorify your name. And now may the blessing of God, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit continue to walk with us, carry us on our journeys as we separate from one another until we meet again. Amen.
Thank you. Journey home safely.